Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. You ever get that strange feeling like you're living the same day over and over, even though everything on the surface looks different? I don't mean just routine, I mean something deeper. Like your life is running on a hidden script, and no matter what choices you make, you somehow end up right back where you started. I felt that too. It's like being inside a maze you didn't know you entered, one with walls that shift when you're not looking. There was a time I thought I had full control over my life. I made plans, set goals, worked hard. But underneath it all, there was this quiet unease I couldn't shake. I couldn't explain it, not even to myself. All I knew was that no matter how much I achieved or changed on the outside, something on the inside stayed stuck. The same thoughts, the same emotional loops, the same sense of being held back by something I couldn't name. And then it hit me one day, hard. I was sitting in my car, stuck in traffic, just staring at the rearview mirror. I wasn't thinking about anything profound, just zoning out. And suddenly, it was like this wave of clarity washed over me. I realized I'd had the exact same thoughts the day before, and the day before that, almost word for word. The same doubts, the same stories, the same silent criticisms. It was like my mind was playing a tape on repeat. That realization shook me. I started questioning everything. Why do I keep thinking these thoughts? Are they even mine? Where did they come from? The more I looked, the more I saw. I was living inside a kind of mental architecture built from old experiences, fears, and unspoken beliefs. And the scariest part? I didn't even remember building it. I just woke up one day and found myself living inside it. You know that saying, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. It's true. My mind was constantly feeding me distractions, social media, worries, endless plans and to-do lists, old regrets, imagined futures. It was like it knew exactly how to keep me spinning. And anytime I tried to sit still, just to be with myself, something would jolt me back into the noise. A thought, a memory, a feeling of guilt or urgency. Something would always rise up to pull me away from the stillness. I started to wonder, what if this isn't just about distraction? What if there's something my mind doesn't want me to see? That was the beginning. The moment I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was being kept blind on purpose. Not by some external force, but by my own mental patterns. The mind isn't inherently malicious, but it is designed to protect us. And one of the ways it does that is by keeping us in the familiar, even if the familiar is painful. Because pain you know feels safer than uncertainty you don't. So I started paying attention. I noticed how every time I got close to a deeper truth, like the idea that I'm not my thoughts, or that I might be more than my past, my mind would freak out. Suddenly, I'd remember an urgent task or feel a strong emotional reaction. It was like my brain was saying, nope, not going there. Too risky. Let's go back to what we know. I know this sounds strange, maybe even paranoid. But once you start noticing the patterns, you can't unsee them. You realize that a huge part of your life has been governed by an invisible force. Not fate, not bad luck, but your own unexamined thoughts. And these thoughts have a structure, a system, almost like a program running silently in the background. That's when it truly hit me. I wasn't free. Not really. I was reacting to a set of internal scripts I didn't consciously write. Scripts written by childhood experiences, societal conditioning, trauma, fear, shame, you name it. And as long as I kept mistaking those scripts for me, I'd stay lost in the maze. But something beautiful happens the moment you see the maze. You're no longer completely trapped. There's this gap, a small one, but it's there between the thought and your awareness of it. That's where the door opens. That's where you begin to wake up. I'm not saying I figured it all out. I'm still learning, still stumbling, still getting caught in loops. But now I see them, and that has made all the difference. Awareness isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning. It's the light flickering in the distance, reminding you that you're not crazy and you're not alone. You're just starting to see clearly for the first time. And if you're reading this and feeling something stir inside you, that quiet recognition that maybe this is your story too. Then trust that, because the moment you begin to really question, you've already taken your first step out of the maze. There was this moment, and I don't know how else to describe it, where I realized I had been living under the illusion of control. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with thunder or some big emotional breakdown. It was quiet, still, almost eerie in its simplicity. I had been sitting with myself, trying once again to clear my mind, when I suddenly noticed something that should have been obvious a long time ago. I couldn't stop my thoughts. Not really. Try it for yourself sometime. Just sit, breathe, and decide you're going to think absolutely nothing for the next 30 seconds. What you'll probably find, as I did, is that the mind doesn't care about your decision. Thoughts come anyway, one after another. Sometimes about what you're doing later, sometimes about that thing you said to someone 3 years ago. They're like uninvited guests that never stop arriving. And yet, we go through life believing we're in charge. That was the second crack in the wall for me. First, I saw the maze. Then I realized I wasn't steering. My thoughts, my emotions, even the sense of who I was, they all seemed to arise on their own. And yet I had spent years identifying with them. I am anxious. I am angry. I am broken. But what if I wasn't? What if those were just experiences passing through me, not definitions of me? It's like this. We've been taught to believe we are the voice in our heads, the narrator. But what if we're not the voice? What if we're the space the voice speaks into? That idea hit me like a wave. It felt disorienting, even frightening at first. Because if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? If I'm not the voice, not the emotions, not the reactions, what's left? This is where things get really uncomfortable. Because the moment you stop clinging to those identities, you fall into something unfamiliar, something vast. And your mind hates that. The mind wants labels, stories, anchors. It wants you to believe you're someone specific with fixed traits and a consistent personality. Not because it's true, but because it feels safer that way. The known, even if it's painful, is easier to grasp than the unknown. And yet, deep down, we all know we're more than the stories we've told ourselves. We just forget. We forget that we weren't born with these beliefs about ourselves, about others, about life. They were handed to us, inherited, imprinted, sometimes gently, sometimes through trauma. But none of it was truly chosen. That realization was equal parts liberating and terrifying. Because if I didn't choose this identity, this me, I had spent decades reinforcing, then maybe I could choose something else. Or even better, maybe I didn't have to choose at all. Maybe the real me, the true self, was the one watching it all unfold. The one who notices, the one who questions, the one who sees. It's hard to explain how profound that shift was. It didn't make my problems disappear overnight. It didn't stop the noise in my head, but it created a gap, a tiny, powerful space between something is happening and this is who I am. That space, it's everything. It's the beginning of freedom. Because when you realize you're not your thoughts, you stop reacting to them like they're absolute truth. When anxiety shows up, you can say, "Oh, hello, I see you," and then let it pass. When anger flares, you can pause instead of lashing out. You start choosing instead of just reacting. And sure, your mind will fight back. It'll tell you this is nonsense. It'll scream that you are your feelings, your habits, your past, that you're defined by what you've done or what's been done to you. But listen closely, and you'll realize something subtle. Those protests, they're just more thoughts, more noise. The truth, the real truth, it's silent. It's the stillness beneath the chaos. It's the awareness that hears the screaming voice without getting pulled into its story. And that awareness doesn't need fixing. It doesn't need validation. It just is. Always has been. I'm telling you this not as someone who's reached some enlightened state, but as someone who's been in the trenches, still is, honestly. Someone who knows what it feels like to be tangled in your own mind, believing you're broken beyond repair. But you're not. You never were. You've just been identifying with the wrong thing. You're not the storm. You're the sky. There's something strange that happens when you begin to wake up. Not all at once, not in some dramatic enlightenment moment, but slowly, like fog lifting in the early morning. You start to hear the background noise, you've been living with your whole life. It's like realizing you've been standing next to a loud engine, and only when it turns off do you notice how quiet everything really is. That background noise, that's the mind. Constantly humming, constantly distracting. And the more I tuned into it, the more I saw how it worked. It wasn't just thoughts. It was a whole system. It pulled my attention in 1,000 directions. Old regrets, future plans, social media feeds, arguments that hadn't happened yet. Anything but now. It's wild how much of our life we spend somewhere else. Not in the room, not in the moment. We're physically present, but mentally miles away. And the scary part is that feels normal. We've normalized this chaos so deeply that peace feels unfamiliar. Silence can be terrifying when you're used to noise. I started noticing how every time I tried to just sit and be, even for a minute, something in me panicked. Like I was missing something. Like I was being irresponsible. You should be doing something, my mind would whisper. This is a waste of time. But I wasn't doing nothing. I was trying to return to myself. And somehow, that was the most threatening thing I could do. That's when I realized the truth. The mind doesn't want you to wake up. Not because it's evil, but because it's wired for survival, not truth. Its job is to keep you alive, not to set you free. And anything unfamiliar, even peace, feels dangerous to a system that's built on pattern recognition and prediction. So instead, it distracts. It floods you with to-do lists, fears, cravings, comparisons, and endless streams of what-if scenarios. Not because any of it is real, but because it's familiar. And that familiarity gives the illusion of safety. But once you start seeing this, you can't unsee it. I remember one morning I was sitting on the couch, coffee in hand, just breathing. Nothing special. No music, no phone. And I felt this deep ache rise up, not from my body, but from somewhere quieter. This ache that said, "You've been running for so long, and you're so tired." I didn't cry, but I could have. Because in that moment, I wasn't avoiding anything. I wasn't numbing. I was just present. And what showed up was the part of me that had been waiting patiently all these years to be seen. This is the part the distractions hide. The raw, tender truth that's been under the noise. Not brokenness. Just a deep longing to come home to yourself. And look, I get it. It's hard. We live in a world built on distraction. We're constantly being pulled outward by devices, by expectations, by endless stimulation. Stillness is almost revolutionary now. It's countercultural, but that's exactly why it matters so much. You want to know the real trick of the mind? It makes the simple things look complicated. It convinces you that awakening is some mystical thing only monks or gurus experience. But it's not. It's right here, in this breath, in this moment, in choosing to pay attention, not to the chaos, but to what's underneath it. The truth has always been simple. The noise is what makes it feel distant. So what do? You stop chasing. You stop running. And instead, you start listening. Not to the voice in your head, but to the silence beneath it. You start observing without reacting. You notice the patterns, the distractions, the ways your mind tries to pull you back into sleep. And you just say, there it is again. And then you let it pass. That, I think, is the real beginning. Not some huge realization. Not a lightning strike. Just the quiet choice to stop believing everything your mind says. The choice to come back to what's real, your breath, your body, your awareness. The only things that were ever real to begin with. And when you do, even for a moment, you'll feel it. That soft hum of presence. The place where the noise fades and something sacred returns. You know what no one really tells you? The closer you get to waking up, to really seeing through the patterns that have kept you asleep, the louder your mind fights back. It doesn't come with sirens or flashing lights. It's subtler than that. It comes as doubt, as resistance, as that little voice whispering, "This is pointless. You're fine as you are. Why dig so deep? Or worse, you're broken, and this won't help." And the thing is, that voice sounds like you. It knows exactly what to say to get you to stop looking. It uses your own tone, your own logic, your own fears. That's the ego. That's its last stand. It took me a while to recognize it for what it was. I used to think it was me, this inner cynic who always had a reason to back out, a reason to return to what was familiar. I try to meditate or journal, or just sit with my thoughts, and suddenly I'd get flooded with excuses. You're wasting time. You already know this stuff. It's not going to change anything. But here's what I started to see. Those weren't neutral thoughts. They were defense mechanisms. My mind had created an identity, a story of who I was, and any threat to that story triggered an alarm. The moment I tried to rewrite the script, it panicked. Because if I wasn't who I had always believed I was, then who was I? That's the terrifying part. Letting go of the identity you've built, even if it's made of pain, feels like death. And in a way it is. It's the death of illusion, the death of the false self. And the ego will fight like hell to keep that from happening. It's not because it's evil. It's just afraid. You see, the ego survives through control. It needs to know. It needs things to be certain, definable, predictable. It tells you stories about the world, about other people, about yourself. Not because they're true, but because they make you feel like you understand, like you're safe. And the moment you start questioning those stories, the ego sees danger. So it tightens its grip. You'll notice this resistance most when you're on the edge of something real, when you're about to break a cycle, when you're about to see a lie for what it is. Suddenly, you'll feel anxious, tired, distracted, maybe even physically uncomfortable. That's not random. That's your ego's last line of defense. It's saying, don't go there. Don't change the rules. I remember one night, I was journaling about a belief I'd held for years. Something like, I'm hard to love. It had always just felt true, like a quiet background hum I didn't question. But for the first time, I asked myself, where did that come from? And the deeper I went, the more uncomfortable I became. I actually started sweating. My chest tightened. It felt like I was doing something dangerous just by asking the question. And then I realized I was threatening the foundation my ego had built my whole emotional life on. That belief wasn't just a thought. It was a cornerstone. It had shaped how I approached relationships, how I talked to myself, how I protected myself from rejection. Without it, everything would shift. That's the paradox. Freedom feels like danger. Peace feels like risk. Letting go feels like falling into a void. But that void? It's not empty. It just feels that way because the noise has finally stopped. And what's left? The silence, the stillness. That's you. The real you. The one who doesn't need to be defined by trauma or past roles or survival strategies. Of course, the ego doesn't go quietly. Even after you see through it, it keeps trying. It adapts. It gets clever. It tells you you're awake now and uses that to create a new identity. I'm spiritual. I'm enlightened. And just like that, it builds a new prison, prettier but just as limiting. So what do? You stay curious. You keep watching. You notice the resistance when it shows up, and instead of fighting it, you greet it. Ah, there you are. I see you. That's all it takes. Awareness. The ego can't survive in direct awareness. It needs your identification to thrive. But when you observe it, calmly, without judgment, it loses its power. It's a process. Messy, confusing, sometimes painful, but also beautiful. Because every time the illusion cracks, more light gets in. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin to come home to yourself. Not the story, not the role, but the presence underneath it all. And let me tell you, nothing's more worth it. There's a moment, if you keep going, where something shifts. It's not dramatic, not like the movies. There's no lightning, no revelation shouted from the rooftops. It's quieter than that. It's the moment you stop fighting. Not because you've given up, but because you finally see what you were fighting against and realize it was never real. Not really. You were wrestling with shadows, trying to fix thoughts, trying to change emotions, trying to control everything inside you that felt wrong or uncomfortable. But suddenly, you see it for what it is, a trick, an endless cycle, one that was never meant to be one. This hit me like a whisper more than a roar. I was going through another one of those internal spirals, thoughts racing, trying to find meaning, trying to figure it all out. And then something in me just said, stop. Not in frustration, just clarity. I stopped reacting. I didn't run toward the thoughts or away from them. I didn't try to understand or label them. I just let them pass, like clouds in the sky. And in that stillness, something opened up. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing the thing you were afraid of falling into was never really there. That the fall you've been avoiding was just a story your mind told to keep you safe. What I'm trying to say is the real shift doesn't happen when you win the battle. It happens when you realize there is no battle. That your mind has been playing both roles, the attacker and the defender, and you've just been caught in the middle. You don't need to silence your mind. You don't need to fix your thoughts or suppress your emotions. You just need to stop identifying with them. Let them pass. Let them be. Because the moment you stop reacting, the whole thing begins to dissolve. And I won't lie, it feels strange at first. It's like stepping out a story you've been living in for years. You feel unanchored, almost weightless. Like, if I'm not the thoughts and I'm not the emotions, then who am I? But here's the beautiful part. You're still here, still breathing, still aware, still you, just without the chains. That's the real awakening. It's not about escaping your humanity. It's about embracing it, fully, deeply, without resistance. You feel fear, but you're not afraid. You feel sadness, but you're not consumed. You feel anger, but it doesn't control you. You're not avoiding anything. You're allowing everything. And somehow, in that allowing, everything begins to soften. I used to think freedom meant changing everything, becoming this better, wiser, more enlightened version of myself. But now I think real freedom is just space. Space between you and your thoughts. Space to choose. Space to breathe. It's like you've been underwater your whole life, trying to swim, trying to breathe through the panic. And then one day you realize you can stand up. The water wasn't that deep. You were never drowning. You just forgot you could stop struggling. I'm not saying the thoughts go away. They don't. The mind still does what it does. It still throws doubts and fears and distractions. But now, you see them as what they are, mental weather. They pass. You don't have to go with them. You start to trust yourself in a deeper way. Not your identity, not your story, but that quiet awareness behind everything. The witness, the presence, the part of you that's never changed, even as everything else has. And with that trust comes a kind of peace that isn't fragile. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It's not about feeling good all the time. It's about knowing that even when things get hard, and they will, you're not lost. You're here, steady, awake. So if you're in the middle of the mess, if your thoughts feel loud and your emotions feel overwhelming, just remember, you don't have to fix anything. You just have to see it, be with it, and then let it move. Because it will. It always does. And what's left when it passes? You. Just you. And that's more than enough. You ever have one of those moments where everything you believed about yourself starts to crack? Not because someone challenged you or life knocked you down, but because you started to see it wasn't real anymore. That identity you built, the version of you that was tough or broken or always in control, it starts to crumble. And even though it's painful, something in you whispers, this is it. This is the truth trying to come through. That happened to me. It didn't feel enlightening. It felt like everything was falling apart. My beliefs, my routines, even my sense of purpose, all of it began to feel hollow. Like I had been living in a house made of cardboard, and now I was standing in the rain, watching it dissolve. And there was no shelter to run to, no way to rebuild what was being stripped away. At first, I tried to fix it. I read more books, watched more videos, meditated harder, but nothing worked. Because what was happening wasn't a problem to be solved. It was an awakening. And awakenings rarely feel gentle. They feel like being stripped bare. You see, when you start to see through the illusions your mind has built, you don't just feel free, you also feel lost. Because for the first time, you're stepping out of a story that's defined your entire life. A story made of labels and roles and patterns. And as that story fades, you're left standing in a space you've never known. Uncertainty. And man, does the mind hate uncertainty. That's when the fear kicks in. What if I'm nothing without my story? What if there's no meaning? What if I'm just floating in some void, disconnected from everything I once believed? I felt that fear so deeply it shook my bones. I didn't just question the world. I questioned myself, my worth, my reality, my future. But here's what I learned. The fear isn't the end, it's the threshold. It means you're close. So close to truth that your ego is throwing everything it has at you to stop you from crossing. Because once you cross, it knows it can't control you anymore. It knows the game is up. And what's waiting on the other side? Silence. Not emptiness. Not numbness. Just this vast, open silence. Like finally hearing your own heartbeat after a lifetime of noise. At first, it feels like nothing. But stay with it, and it becomes everything. It's peace. It's presence. It's you without the costume. This silence is what the ego feared most. Because in that space, you realize you never needed the stories. You never needed to be someone. You just needed to be. And once I touched that silence, even for a moment, I understood. I'd spent my whole life trying to become something, someone worthy of love, success, peace. But the whole time, I was that already. I just didn't know how to see it through the noise. The paradox is this. When you finally stop trying to fix yourself, you begin to heal. When you stop trying to become something, you remember who you've always been. And when you stop chasing freedom, you discover it was never somewhere else. It was inside you, hidden but never gone. So yeah, it's scary. Letting go of the old version of yourself is one of the most disorienting things you'll ever do. But it's also the most loving. Because buried underneath all that fear and resistance is a self that's been waiting to come alive. Not the ideal self, not the perfect version, but the real one. The one that feels. The one that notices. The one that doesn't need to prove anything. And once you meet that version of yourself, really meet them, you'll wonder how you ever believed the lies your mind told you. You'll wonder how you ever called those chains home. I used to think freedom meant being in control of my thoughts, my reactions, my life. I believed if I could just master my mind, if I could fix the way I felt, then I'd finally arrive. But the deeper I went, the more I saw that real freedom isn't about control. It's about letting go. Letting go of the idea that you need to become someone. Letting go of the belief that you have to earn your worth. Letting go of the constant need to chase, fix, improve. It's terrifying at first, I won't lie, because the mind screams, but if I let go, who will I be? That question haunted me for a long time. I thought letting go meant I'd become detached or passive or empty. But it's the opposite. When you let go of everything you're not, you finally make space for what's real. There was this morning, quiet, unremarkable in most ways, when I felt it. I was drinking tea, no phone, no plans, just sitting with myself. And suddenly, this wave of peace came over me. Not happiness, not excitement, just stillness. A quiet that felt like home. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't trying to be anyone. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. It was like my whole being sighed in relief. I realized then that I didn't need to escape my emotions. I didn't need to replace my thoughts with better ones. I just needed to stop believing I was them. Emotions still come. Thoughts still swirl. But they're not me. They're not mine in the way I used to believe. They're just passing through like weather across the sky. And I, the real I, am the sky. Flushed, unmoved, aware. I don't live in that peace all the time. Sometimes I still get caught, still react, still forget. But the difference now is I know where home is. I know how to return. And that has changed everything. Pain still visits, but I no longer build a house for it. I don't invite it to stay. I watch it arrive. I feel it fully. And then I let it leave when it's ready. Same with joy. Same with fear. Same with every part of this messy, beautiful human experience. Because being awake doesn't mean escaping life. It means finally living it. With your eyes open, your heart soft, and your hands unclenched. There's so much power in softness, in allowing, in surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means giving up, but the kind that says, I don't need to fight anymore. I don't need to carry this weight. And it's wild how, once you stop resisting, everything begins to shift. Not because you force it, but because you've stopped holding it in place. You start noticing beauty in the ordinary. You listen more. You breathe deeper. You stop needing every moment to be extraordinary. And that, ironically, makes life feel more magical than ever before. You stop trying to find yourself and realize you were never lost. You just got buried under stories, fears, and expectations that were never really yours. That's the real miracle. Not changing who you are, but remembering who you've always been. And maybe the greatest gift of all is this. When you know this for yourself, you start to see it in everyone else too. Even in people who seem asleep. Even in those still trapped in the noise. You don't judge them. You don't try to wake them up. You just love them. Because you remember how it felt. You remember how hard it was to let go. How scary it was to step into the unknown. And so instead of pushing, you become a quiet presence, a soft light in the dark, showing others what's possible just by being it. That's what freedom looks like. Not perfect, not polished, just real. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.